we have witnessed the drama and tension of round 1 of Season 8 now for the continuation of what may just be our most thrilling season yet. Multiple drivers into round number 2 as legitimate title contenders after a cracker at Silverstone last time out. So roll on round number 2. Welcome then to the Sochi Autodrome. Welcome to Russia for round number 2 of Season 8 of the Formula PlayStation League. My name is Rob Kershaw. I'll be taking you through 18 minutes of qualifying and 27 laps as we open up the next chapter of this title race. JT returns tonight and he'll know after round number 1 that he has an almighty battle on his hands right up until June to keep hold of his FPSL crown. Jaya is the last winner of the first race in Silverstone, unable to join us this evening. He's got prior commitments that he has to tend to, but multiple other drivers were contenders for the race and for the podium in Silverstone last Tuesday night. So we are still set for a thrilling Grand Prix here with Vapor Canute, of course, with us as well, searching for his first podium of the season, as well as that first victory, which may just prove quite elusive this season for certain drivers, given the amount of competitive, just the amount of competitiveness really that we've got in Season 8 so far. So just the 12 drivers joining us this evening, but of course a greater opportunity for those 12 drivers to score points as a result of the lack of drivers in the lobby this evening. As FPSL then in the Mercedes will be the first driver to head out on track at the start of qualifying at this 5.8 kilometre circuit. $154 would be the 154 kilometres, I should say, would be the usual. Right, that'll be a long race, wouldn't it? The usual race distance around this circuit in a 50% Grand Prix. And Sol, who didn't join us for the first race in Silverstone, is here now in the Mercedes, and we'll see what he can do. And judging by the pace at Silverstone, how tight it was, it's going to take a hell of an effort to be on par with the quickest drivers in Division 1, which just makes it all the more exciting, particularly when you head into the Grand Prix, as to who is going to come out on top at the end of it. Mercedes, of course, the only team to win here over the course of the 6 races that we've had between 7 races that we've had between 2014 and 2019. It's been extremely Mercedes dominated as this Grand Prix over the years. But interestingly enough, there's only been 2 victories from pole out of those 7, and 2 wins as well outside the front row. So Mercedes definitely have pace here, but they also have a knack of coming back in the Grand Prix. Valtteri Bottas, one of the winners from outside the front row, when he passed the 2 Ferraris off the start line in 2017 and held on just about for his first victory in Formula 1. Won here as well, of course, last season after his teammate Lewis Hamilton broke the practice start protocol. He was actually extremely quick that weekend, in fairness, Valtteri Bottas anyway. So you would say he deserved the victory, and we'll see if FRL Sol can continue that trend of Mercedes winners in Sochi by winning this Grand Prix in the Formula PlayStation League. Everybody then on a flying up, apart from Knowing Like, Cohen Rob, Vapor Cobalt, Bazooka Joe and TRT James. Joe and James still in their garages. Sol, provided he keeps it all together in the final part of this lap, will be the first driver to set a lap time, and that'll be the benchmark for everybody else to beat. Between now and the end of the sessions, he gets the car stopped for a very tricky chicane of 13 and 14. It's a fairly good exit, just tries to get himself off the curb, and through the final chicane then comes Sol in towards these final couple of corners Quite a difficult one to get right. Knowing Light has retired from the session already in the Red Bull. There he is. So, yeah, Knowing Light has binned it there. And Sol with a 1:30.8 to open his account for the session. And Miles Dunn has had his lap taken off him just there. And so he will come into the pits. But, well, that's a shocker, isn't it, for Knowing Light? Losing the back end clearly in the final couple of corners to crash into the wall. And it's Harrison, 1:31.0. So just a little bit slower than Sol, who has the fastest lap time until the Ferrari of Lewis takes it off him. 1:30.2, 6/10 away from Sol. So that is well, very much the lap to beat in the early going. Vapor Canute, though, a title contender, is just coming up towards the final corner now in the Williams, and across the line he goes to set a 1:37.5 to go P4. So clearly not a competitive lap from him. Probably backed out of it towards the end of it. Kobal is also out there. He's just coming up towards the final two turns himself in the McLaren. And round the final corner, and what can he set? Here it is, a 1:31.0 for Vapor Kobal to put him ahead of Canute. And only to look at that, just behind Harrison, 1/1000th of a second behind the AlphaTauri of Harrison. So very, very tight at the top of the standings. Benjamin as well as Carwin Robb, also decided to back out of his lap. JT was on an outlap as well earlier on, so I think a few drivers have had their runs invalidated, their first runs invalidated in qualifying, which has meant that we have 5 drivers on the lap chart so far, with of course Vapor Canute setting a very below average lap on his first run. I wonder if that was just another warm-up lap. Mercedes had a habit of doing this a few years ago, just going out and doing essentially 2 out laps before setting 1 flying lap after that. So that might just be the tactic that Canute's employing here to try and warm up the tyres, or whatever he's trying to do. This is, I believe, a push lap now for the Williams, the 2-time champion. Lost his crown though to JT last season after season 7 was cut short with JT as the leader. Bit of a lock up there into the final corner, but he goes P3, 1:30.9, which does make you wonder, without that little lock up there, what could that have been? Because you can see how close he is, just over 1/10 of a second behind Sol. Would that have been P1 without that, P2 without that lock up? Probably not, has to be said, particularly given that he's nearly 7/10 as well away from Lewis, who is our, well, almost looks like an imperious pace setter so far. But without, of course, jumping to any conclusions as to who's going to get pole position, because we are expecting lap times to drop. Given that lap time by Lewis, you wouldn't bet against the quickest time in qualifying dropping into the 1:29s. The lap record here was Lewis Hamilton, 1:35.7 in 2019. That's the race lap record. Valtteri Bottas is 1:31.3 in 2018. Still remains as the fastest lap ever done at this circuit, either in qualifying or the Grand Prix. That was in Q3, the pole position lap time, and of course had to relinquish the lead to Lewis Hamilton, who was challenging for the championship at the time. Benjamin then in towards the second corner, and that chicane there all counts as 1 turn, so that's turn 2, and then round this almost never-ending turn 3, which leads straight into the rather short braking zone of turn 4. Easy to lock up and then easy to lose the rear, as he does well not to do there, and then through towards turn 5, which leads into the sweeping turn 6, and in towards turn 7 he goes. Now through 8, and it's a pretty tidy run this so far, isn't it? In towards 9 for Benjamin, and now he opens up the DRS as he goes to the flat out turn 10, which leads into 11, and then the braking zone of turn 12. It's all a little bit tricky, the quarter numbers round here. And there he goes, and through turn 13, potentially a little bit of understeer through the first part of the chicane, but nothing that will affect him too much in towards the chicane of 14 and 15, which brings him in towards 16 as JT sets the fastest lap meanwhile in the Alfa Romeo. 1:29.8 from him. He was Benjamin's teammate last season. Benjamin now for AlphaTauri, 1:31.2. That's the 8th and thus far slowest lap time so far. Carwyn Robb in P11 with TRT James now in the Ferrari, 1:30.5 from him. So he puts himself up into that top 3 with Carwyn Robb still out there, just finishing his flying lap. Bazooka Joe is on an outlap in the 2nd McLaren. So we will eventually have 12 drivers on the timesheets, knowing Light will not be setting a lap because he crashed at the very beginning of qualifying, just under 9 minutes to go. What can Carwyn Robb do here in the Alfa Romeo? He can go 3rd fastest, 1:30.3, displaces James, and this is looking very good for Alfa Romeo. 2 drivers inside the top 3 so far in qualifying. With Bazooka Joe out there now, opening up the DRS through the flat-out turn 1 for him. So it's a 1:29.8 to beat from JT at the moment. That's the lap time everybody's going for. So we have descended into the 1:29s in this session. Oh, Bazooka Joe almost was hitting the wall on the inside of turn 3. Had to really correct the steering as he heads in towards turn 4. Wouldn't really have cost him any time. But certainly a little scare that he would have preferred to avoid, as he brings his car now into the middle sector with the tight, twisty, sweeping corners awaiting him. Really good traction through there for Bazooka Joe, and in towards this final part of the lap as he sets himself up. Important corner this as he prepares to open the DRS on the exit. There it is, and in towards the braking zone of the chicane of 12 and 13. Stays tight to the wall on the entrance to the second part of the chicane, clips the curb and opens the steering out a little bit to allow for a smoother exit through the final chicane. Then good run from the McLaren driver, and in towards these final 2 turns he goes with that unusual pit entrance at the penultimate corner. Through the final turn he comes, and this from Bazooka Joe is P8 with a 1:31.0, and Soul is out as well of the session, so 1:30.8 from him, and currently P6 is the best he will manage in this session because he is out. Lewis, meanwhile, has had his lap invalidated by running very wide just there, and so that is his lap gone. Has he damaged his front wing, I wonder? Yes, he has. So he's clipped his front wing somewhere. That might have been on the inside of turn 1, because everybody's been taking a very tight line through 1 so far to try and gain as much time as possible. And that, I believe, is what Lewis has fallen foul of there. Cobalt then on a lap at the moment as well. He's been displaced by his teammate Bazooka Joe. Cobalt winning the qualifying battle after round number 1 in Silverstone. He would like to maintain that here in round 2 as well, as through the final chicane he comes. Bit of a tighter line than his teammate employed just a few moments ago. In towards the penultimate corner then comes Cobalt. It's a good run. Now the final turn, over the curb and across the line. P7, 1:30.0, and he does go ahead of his teammate Bazooka Joe. And Sol, who's just retired from the session, is also down to 8th place now as a legacy of that. There's Harrison, who's just taken a bit of a slipstream there of Cobalt. Very kind of the McLaren driver to give that to Harrison as he begins his flying lap. P10 for him at the moment, 1:31.0 for the AlphaTauri man. His teammate Benjamin just below him on a 1:31.2. So not much separating the 2 AlphaTauri drivers, but they are down towards the bottom of the timing screens as it stands right now. JT has gone back out on track as well in the Alfa Romeo. He's currently on a flying lap. Harrison halfway round his lap now, and it's been a very good run so far from Harrison in the Red Bull last season alongside Carwyn Robb, who is currently up in P3. So Harrison would very much like to get up there. That was a good rivalry last season between those two. A friendly rivalry. They very much put a good shift in for the Red Bull team whilst they were teammates there. final corner then comes Harrison, and that is a 1:30.6 to go into 6th position in Russia. So not a bad lap from him. 1:30.6 is, of course, it's less than a second away from the pace setter JT at the moment. And JT's had his lap taken off him, so that is an invalidation for him, which means that he will not be going any quicker on this particular run. So he still has the pole position lap time right now. 4/10 clear of the Ferrari of Lewis with just under 4 minutes to go of qualifying. Miles Dunn is on a run as well at the moment for Racing Point. He's fighting the rear on the exit of turn 13 in towards 14 and 15 now for the Racing Point driver. Takes a little bit of a later apex through 15, but brings the car into the pits to back out of that run. So pretty much everybody in the pits now. Harrison still out there because he's on an end lap, having just finished his run that's put him into 6th place. Marginally in front of Miles Dunn, who's just come into the pits having backed out of his lap as well. So JT then is P1, it's Lewis P2 in the Ferrari Cohen Rob in the second Alfa Romeo, currently occupying 3rd place. Vapor Canute, the 2-time champion, is 4th in the Williams, with TRT James in P5 just behind him in the second. Ferrari Harrison P6, 1:30.6 from him. Miles Dunn P7 with a 1:30.7 just in front of Cobalt in P8. Soul is down to 9th, having retired from the session. Bazooka Joe P10, and Benjamin occupying P11 with Knowing Light, crashing out of the session really before he was able to get going to begin with. Cobalt then in the McLaren, the American driving for McLaren, the first to do so since Phil Hill back in the day. Long time ago that, of course. Anyone who remembers that is probably a little old, you would have to say. Sorry to anyone who does remember that. I don't, personally. It was before my time, but it's one of those things you research. In towards these final 2 turns then comes Vapor Cobalt to begin another flying lap for him as he crosses the line to begin his flying lap. Through towards the first braking zone then of turn 2, the chicane, which leads him into the sweeping left-hander of turn 3. Towards the braking zone of 4 as he just clips the apex. Oh, and into the wall. So he's spun the rears on the exit of turn 4. He's done pretty much as Sebastian Vettel, slewed across the track and has smashed his McLaren into the barrier. So that is Cobalt's run done with, and that is the McLaren then out of qualifying pretty much. That was his last chance to go any quicker, and the McLaren finds himself, well, starting at best 8th place as James retires from the session as well in the in the Ferrari, I should say. Not too sure what's happened to him. He stopped through turn 3, hasn't he? So I'm not too sure what's happened there to James, but he's lost it very early on in the lap, and Lewis very nearly loses it through turns 12 and 13 as in towards 14 and 15 he goes. This then could be pole position for Lewis as he comes up towards the final couple of corners. Really important here to get as much time as he possibly can as he gets the car stopped for the final corner. And what can Lewis do here? It's been a clean run, and it's P1, 1:29.5, sliding across the line in the process. A really good lap, and JT's had his lap invalidated, so surely here it's going to be pole position for Lewis, unless JT's teammate Cohen Rob has anything to do with it. He's just opened up his DRS and he's going to get a slipstream as well off his teammate JT. So JT won't get pole himself, but he might just be able to help his teammate Cohen Rob take pole. And he is purple in the middle sector, a 10th up on his personal best. Lewis's sliding finish across the line would be an absolutely excellent and a stylish way to grab pole position here in Russia, but is Cohen Rob about to take that off him as up towards the final 2 turns he comes. So important to nail this. It's a 129.5 to beat. Can Cohen Rob do it, or will he have to settle for 3rd place? Yes, he will. So the slipstream was not enough from JT. Canute's had his lap invalidated as well, which will mean that he can't improve, and he slides across the line as well. Stylish, but not P1 as Lewis managed to do. Harrison then round the final corner for him, currently in 6th place. Can he improve on that? No, he can't. He can smash Canute across the line, but that is the end of qualifying here in Russia. Lewis then with a brilliant lap and an even more impressive finish to the lap as he went sideways across the line. Steals pole position away from JT. He's already established himself as an early title contender, has Lewis, and he's taken pole for round number 2. Lewis then pole position. Russia just under, I should say, 3/10 ahead of JT. Cohen Rob in P3 in the 2nd Alfa Romeo. Canute in 4th for Williams. TRT James takes 5th place in the 2nd Ferrari. It's AlphaTauri. It's the AlphaTauri of Harrison in 6th. Miles Dunn takes 7th for Racing Point. It is Cobalt who starts the Grand Prix in 8th for McLaren. Benjamin in 9th. Sol rounds out the top 10 for Mercedes, with Bazooka Joe in 11th in the 2nd McLaren, and Knowing Light crashed out of qualifying quite early on in the Grand Prix, which means that he will start the Grand Prix from last. So just remember to get your predictions in for the start of the Grand Prix. Or for the end of the Grand Prix, actually, maybe the start as well. Let me know what's going to happen off the start. Anyone who gets it right gets a cookie. Let's say that. I don't know. Don't know if anyone likes chocolate chip cookies, really. I'm not a massive fan, but that's what you get if you predict the start of this race correctly. Who's going to get off the line first? The launch, so important off the start of this Grand Prix, because there's not all that many overtaking opportunities in Russia, so it's important to get it right off the start of the Grand Prix. And so we'll see who can get that right, and of course who can get the strategy right as well, because you just never know if there's going to be a safety car early on or a safety car at any point over the course of this race, as Lewis gets us underway on the formation lap. Russia, of course, home to the 2014 Winter Olympics. It goes around lots of different venues that were used in what was a very successful event all the way back in 2014 now. Crazy. Remember the curling? That was fun. I don't know if anyone else remembers the curling, but it was just one of the most satisfying sports to watch. One of those things that you probably wouldn't ever really watch again if it wasn't for the Winter Olympics, but it's an Olympic sport. Like a lot of things in the Olympics, in fairness, you would never really watch archery, but in the Olympics, for some reason, you just think, you know what, I'll give that a watch. Don't know if anybody else feels the same way. It's certainly not how you'd feel about Formula 1. Certainly something that everybody wants to watch over the course of a full season. And league racing, particularly at its best, is an extremely good sport to watch as well. So a one-stop being predicted for this Grand Prix. Soft onto mediums looks like the optimal strategy. There's not all that much tyre at the circuit. It's not horrendously bad, which Yeah, I think his archery's all right, says Miles Dunn. It's pretty good. I like it. Again, I don't know. I don't think I would watch it. Yeah, away from the Olympics, but there's lots of sports. I'm trying to think of other Olympic sports that I just wouldn't really watch normally. Probably kayaking. It's one of those weird ones that I don't think I'd watch. Anyway, Lewis then round the final corner for Ferrari. The only winning constructor here at Russia has been Mercedes in Formula 1. Two of those wins have come from pole. And Lewis here is about to traverse the 890-metre run in towards the braking zone of turn 2, and we'll see who can make their way into that braking zone first. Lewis on pole. The Russian Grand Prix is underway. It's a good start from the Ferrari. JT in second place. Outmatched by him. Vapor Canute, though, flies past Carwin Robb off the start. Really good start for the Williams driver. And he's challenging JT as well, going into turn 2. But Lewis gets there in front. JT goes down the inside and makes contact. Vapor Canute, I should say, makes contact with JT. But he just about manages to avoid a collision with his title rival Miles Dunn, going side by side with TRT James. And James down the inside of the racing point does well to give him just about enough space. Now he's down the inside for the next corner. Can he stay there? Miles Dunn leaves him space on the inside, and they're still wheel to wheel, and TRT James has to settle in behind the racing point. Brilliant battle between those two. Cobalt battling with Soul as well, with Benjamin right behind him. Oh, and a cuts back underneath, and Soul's gone very, very wide indeed and has to give up the place to the McLaren. So Cobalt with a free position there as Soul runs very, very wide indeed. Benjamin's being attacked as well by Bazooka Joe in P11. As everybody just looks to jostle for position at the start of this Grand Prix. Not many changes of position, has to be said, off the beginning, particularly out front. But Lewis with a brilliant getaway to maintain first position in the Russian Grand Prix. But look how close JT is to the back of that Ferrari. Vapor Canute was challenging for second place. He realised the importance of getting as many positions as possible off the start, because it's going to be difficult to overtake at this circuit, with Lewis then setting the fastest lap, of course, on the first lap. So not really too much to go by on that one. In towards turn 2 then they come on lap number 2 of the Grand Prix. It's not lap 3 as it says on the lap counter, because that's just a glitch that Codemasters for some reason love to give us all the time, as is that whole left hand side of the screen, really, with the timing screens just all over the place. That's the joys you get with Codemasters. It's probably going to get worse with EA, to be fair, but I shouldn't really comment on that. So Lewis then trying to break away from the DRS activation, or the DRS window, I should say, of JT, when he's just half a second in front of him at the moment. Carwin Robb still chasing down Vapor Canute, so Soul gets a penalty. He desperately wants Carwin Robb to get back up into those podium places, and probably just to support his teammate JT as well. Of course, he'll also want to challenge his teammate JT. Alfa Romeo will want to play the team game, but they'll also want to beat each other, as Canute weaves and just tries to warm up the tyres. Those tyres, of course, will be plenty warm enough, you would suspect, as he's stuck behind that Ferrari at the moment. But he's just trying to find some extra grip as he gets stuck in the dirty air. And the gaps really are starting to expand out a little bit. There's not many drivers within DRS range of anybody else at the moment. There is Cobalt just behind Harrison. Although I think that's a bit of a lie, really, isn't it, on the timing screens, because Harrison is definitely not 2.6 seconds behind TRT James. There we go, 5/10. That was just a lie, wasn't it, for the game? So everybody's pretty much within DRS. James is just outside the DRS range of Miles Dunn, who is himself just outside the DRS range of Carwin Robb. Knowing Light has come into the pits meanwhile. Carwin Robb then through turn 3. Still chasing down Vapor Canute, going into 4. Canute himself then just falling back a little bit. Virtual safety car is deployed. Soul, he's lost his whole front wing. He was losing positions, and he's lost a lot of carbon fibre off the front of that Mercedes, so not a great debut for him in round number 2 of the season, and that's a long, long way back to the pits, isn't it, from there? He's going to have to travel a fair distance to get back. Benjamin is the car behind him, but of course he can't overtake him because he has a lap delta that he has to stick to, knowing Lights is a further 27 seconds back, and Sol's actually got another penalty for exceeding track limits because of just how wide he's going due to the understeer on that car. I'm pretty sure under Stewart's review after the race he could get that overturned, because he's clearly not gaining anything by going wide. He's losing a lot of time with no front wing. But there we go, back underway, and Cobalt here is challenging Harrison straight away, and he's almost pushing him through turn 12 after slightly outbraking himself. The virtual safety car restart can really fall very nicely for some drivers, and it almost fell perfectly for Cobalt there, but Harrison able to repel that attack for the time being. Lewis has taken full advantage of the restart, and he is now 1.7 seconds clear of JT, so he's left the Alfa Romeo for dead of the restart here. That could be important for Lewis as this race progresses. It's going to help Vapor Canute just to close up slightly to JT now. These two, of course, going at it the last couple of seasons for the FPSL crown. JT stealing, well, not stealing, but taking the title away from Vapor Canute last season. Canute will be pretty eager to get that one back again, but as you can see, 9/10 behind him now, so that would be good news for JT. There we go, just over a second between them, and that allows Carwin Robb to basically have Canute all on his own with DRS on him. Selby Miles gone on to the hard tyres as Cobalt gets a penalty for exceeding track limits in the McLaren. That's a shame for him as he looks to chase down and pass Harrison, but this is going to be a real chance here surely for Carwin Robb as through turn 10 and towards 11 and 12, and Canute might just defend the inside. He does defend the inside, and Carwin Robb tries to go to the outside. Canute locks up. Carwin Robb cuts back underneath him. He may well try to do so again on the exit of turn 13, but Canute just about has him covered off. Look at Miles Dunn as well, looking very racy behind this pair, so Carwin Robb will definitely see even more incentive to get past him as he has a look at the inside. That's going to be very difficult to get it done there, but Canute runs ever so slightly wide. He's really struggling here, Vapor Canute, with the understeer on that Williams, and surely now Carwin Robb's going to have the opportunity going in towards turn 2. Miles Dunn has DRS as well. Carwin Robb's gone to the outside of 1. He streams past the Williams of Vapor Canute. Nothing the former champion can do there, and Carwin Robb launches himself back up into the podium places. Canute, that's the last of his issues at the moment, because Miles Dunn is now right behind him, looking to traverse the Williams for 4th place in Russia. Well, despite Cobalt's penalty, he's still right behind Harrison, but just unable to get past the AlphaTauri at the moment. Harrison doesn't have DRS on TRT James in front of him, which is going to help his cause slightly. But right now, Cobalt having to just settle in behind. Oh, and he's gone very wide, and he stays off the track just to avoid picking up another penalty. So a smart move there from Cobalt, but that's just an example of how much the dirty air is affecting as Miles Dunn gets past Canute. So he's got that move done very early on that straight, which just leads me to believe that Vapor Canute probably made a mistake somewhere. So Miles Dunn up to P4, Canute now down to 5th. Oh, and he goes wide as well. And I just wonder how quickly TRT James can catch up to the Williams, who for whatever reason is really struggling in the first stint of this race. He's gone from attacking JT at the start and even attacking him on the restart as well, to losing 2 positions to Carwin Robb and Miles Dunn. We'll see as well as Canute gets a penalty now after all that. Miles Dunn, we'll see how quickly he can catch up to Carwin Robb and try and get himself into the podium places. Second separating those two, so Miles Dunn not quite within DRS range just yet. Here comes Cobalt down the inside of Harrison into turn 2. Surely he's got the job done this time. Yes, he does. And the American McLaren driver manages to get past, but for how much longer? Because Harrison's still right there. Tries to go around the outside of turn 3. Isn't quite far enough alongside, but he does go for the move into turn 4, but he had to back out of it. Just wasn't close enough to really think about that overtake, as JT manages to work his way back into within a second of Lewis. So Lewis hasn't got the lead, hasn't got the win assured at the moment. Of course, lap 6 of 27, a long way to go in this one. A lot can happen between now and the end. And JT with DRS now, looking to close in ever more on the Ferrari, who is going to have his mirrors full of that red and white car before too long, because JT looks very quick indeed, doesn't he, at the moment. Towards turn 2 then comes Lewis, and a Vapor Canoe coming into the pits now for Williams. So he's had enough of those soft tyres. They weren't doing him all that much good, but of course they are the grippiest compound you can have, and onto the mediums he goes then. Probably for the rest of this Grand Prix, the mediums just might be able to make it as Lewis gets a penalty. That's huge. That is really bad news for Lewis. So in trying to keep JT behind him, he's picked up a 3-second time penalty. And that now is very much, advantage JT, as Lewis does so well to keep that Ferrari out of the barrier. James picks up a penalty as well, so that's both him and Kobal sitting on a penalty at the moment. And Harrison also runs wide just there, which makes it 3 drivers in a row there picking up a penalty at the moment. 6 drivers currently on penalties right now in this race. Towards the braking zone of turn 12 they come. So 3 drivers here, all within a all within a second, sorry, just within just over a second of each other. Through towards the end of the lap they come in towards these final 2 corners. And we'll see here, well, it's not the best exit from Kobal and Harrison in terms of getting past each other, and Lewis then into the pits for Ferrari. Medium tyres on the car for him, and away he goes, and Sol is out of the session in the Mercedes. And what's happened to him? He hasn't stopped the car anyway. I think he's just retired in the pits, hasn't he? Meanwhile, Lewis here rejoins side by side with Benjamin and goes down the inside, tries to keep the position from the AlphaTauri. Benjamin's still there. Lewis does well to give him plenty of space, and he's round the outside at turn 3. Has he got enough grip? He very nearly swipes the front wing off of Benjamin's car, but he manages to keep ahead of Benja, and that's a really important move there for Lewis, as Canute gets another penalty meanwhile. And another massive slide there for Lewis. Yeah, important to keep that position, important to have some clear air, because his rivals, of course, will be making their pit stops in the not too distant future. Miles Dunn, meanwhile, is indeed very close to the back of Carwin Robb's car. So the Alfa Romeo has now got mirrors full of pink, which, of course, in the next game in F1 2010 will be a lot of green with Aston Martin instead of Racing Point. JT pits, so Carwin Robb continues, and JT then in 3rd place now. Where does he end up though? Because of course he'll be behind James and Kobal and Harrison. The big question is going to be, will he rejoin in front of Lewis? You would imagine not. Lewis should actually gain quite a lot of time on him here. The point of the undercut from Lewis, of course, was to try and be further ahead, be a couple of seconds ahead of JT by the time JT comes up the pit. So through goes Lewis, and he is going to be over a second in front, that's for sure, of JT. Just how far in front is he going to be? Well, it's 1.3 as JT comes out of the pits. So certainly not enough to mitigate the penalty that Lewis has. He's going to hope that that JT, I should say, gets a penalty of his own. They're both on medium tyres now, those two, and that should be enough to take them to the end of the Grand Prix. Miles Dunn just slipping back by a couple of tenths from Carwin Robb, as Bazooka Joe, meanwhile, gets back ahead of Harrison, who is ghosting quite a lot. So I just wonder, as Harrison... No, he's joined again. So he had just lost connection, but he's now joined. So, yeah, that was the reason Bazooka Joe was able to get past him. Oh, that's a shame. So Harrison... I'm not too sure. Well, he hasn't got back in the car, as the AI is still driving for him as a ghost car. So, oh dear, not good news that. For Harrison, Lewis then 1.4 ahead of JT. So he'll be hoping that these tyres are a bit kinder to him on this stint. He'll be hoping that he's a little bit quicker in this stint of the Grand Prix, as Canute gets past Benjamin going into turn 12. And that is a position gained for him. Following his pit stop, Miles Dunn's into the pits, as is TRT James and Cobalt. Interestingly, though, Carwin Robb decides to stay out. So he's decided that those tyres will have to go a little bit longer. He's clearly going for a different strategy, potentially in a bid to, well, I don't really know, just to kind of slingshot his way back up towards JT and Lewis towards the end of the race. So he's going to be on fresher tyres than those two. I imagine the plan here is going to be to just take those softs as long as he possibly can. There's almost no point pitting on this lap now, because he's now kind of just between two strategies, really. So he's committed clearly to going a bit longer, or a lot longer. So he needs to sort of just take those tyres as long as he possibly can, stretch them out as far as possible, so that he can, of course, attack Lewis and JT at the end of the race with much fresher tyres. He doesn't really want to have 3-4 lap fresher tyres, because he'll lose too much track position and he won't have enough at the end of the Grand Prix. So yeah, having stayed out this long, you would suspect he's going to stay out for several more laps now, along with Bazooka Joe and Harrison, who is well, he's currently got his wing mirrors full of a sight he didn't really want to see. Lewis and JT right behind him. There goes Lewis, goes side by side with Harrison, and easily gets past him going into turn 12. Just about gets the Ferrari stopped in the process. JT then will be the next one to try and pass Harrison. Oh no, Carwin Robb's in. So I don't know about that. I think he's pitted between strategies here, this Carwin Robb, and I'm not sure that's the best idea. He either had to pit 2 laps ago or pit much later. I just don't see the point of pitting now. I just don't know. I don't know what he gets from that, I'm afraid. Of course, I am just a commentator, so, you know, what would I know? But, yeah, I'm sorry. I think that's a bit of a mistake from Carwin Robb. Yeah, he's side by side with Vapor Canute now as well, so Canute's got past him. So that's what I mean. Yeah, didn't really see a point to that from Carwin Robb, because now his tyres are only 3 laps fresher than Lewis's and Vapor Canute's. So that, to me, just doesn't make that much sense. Either pit on the same lap or just a lap afterwards, or pit several laps afterwards and be on much fresher tyres towards the end of this race and have a better chance of winning. So yeah, I think he's between strategies there, but you never know. He might come back and get on the podium, might come back and win the Grand Prix. Particularly as well as there's a safety car. That just gives everybody else in front a free pit stop as well, which completely... oh, and a very wide goes Canute. That's surely that's Carwin Robb past him. Canute's got DRS, but I don't think it's going to matter. Carwin Robb is side by side with him down towards turn 12, and this is not a good day, is it, for Vapor Canute? He's picked up a couple of penalties. Now he's run wide again, and Carwin Robb then up into 4th place here, with Miles Dunn up next for him to try and pass. JT meanwhile has got himself to within half a second, or just over half a second, to Lewis. So clearly here the medium tyres are not helping Lewis to get away from JT. JT just seems to have a lot more race pace in an Alfa Romeo. Couple that as well with the fact that Lewis has a penalty, and JT very much looks the favourite to win this Grand Prix. Cobalt meanwhile in the McLaren is very close indeed to TRT James. He's got the Ferrari all on his own at the moment. And through turn 1, then down towards turn 2 they come. And this surely here for Cobalt is going to be P6, as down the inside he goes. And he does just about get the position, but James is still there. Tries to fight it to the second part of that chicane, but ultimately it was a futile effort. And Cobalt into 6th. James down to P7 in the Ferrari. So 9 seconds to make up then for Cobalt if he is to catch Vapor Canoe. JT still behind Lewis, still unable to really break inside that half-second window. Of course, he is in the DRS range, but that's not really getting him as close as he needs to be to get himself in front on track. Of course, he doesn't really need to be in front on track. He does have the penalty to Lewis at his disposal come the end of the Grand Prix. That, of course, will help him win the race, provided that he doesn't get a penalty himself, which is the reason, as well as pride, that he'll want to win the Grand Prix on track and not just win it on the timing screens. Knowing light on the soft tyres is very close here to Bazooka Joe, but not close enough going into turn 12 to get that move done on the McLaren just yet. But you suspect it's only a matter of... Oh, no, it's not a matter of time because he spins. So in the dirty air, he's eager to get on the throttle, and that's spun him round. So, yeah, sadly for him, on the softs, on 8-lap old softs as well, his race has gone from bad to worse to terrible because he's now spun the car into the wall again. And, yeah, well outside the points. And, of course, having to go on now to a fresh set of tyres for the end of the race. So it's not a race that's going particularly well for him at all. Meanwhile, TRT James is trying to have a go back here at Vapor Cobalt, but not quite able to get him going into turn 4, but he's certainly not given up, has he, on 6th place just yet, knowing Light has now retired from the session of the Rebel, which means all anyone has to do in this Grand Prix is cross the line, take the checkered flag, and they will score points, however many points that may be, in this Russian Grand Prix at round number 2 of Season 8 in the Formula PlayStation League. 6/10 the gap out front, so Lewis is keeping it just about where it is. He'll still be banking on JT getting a penalty between now and the end. Canute just under a second behind Carwin Robb, so he himself hasn't given up on 4th place. Just wonder if Canute's just starting to find a little bit of rhythm now in that Williams. It's been a pretty average first half of the Grand Prix for him by his lofty standards. And he'll be looking to try and take 4th back away from Carwin Robb, who is struggling to make inroads on Miles Dunn for 3rd place at the moment. 1.5 seconds behind him, and that's just leaving it a little bit vulnerable to the 2-time champion Canute. And it's because of the 2-time champion that you certainly cannot rule Canute out of this podium battle. He may yet get there, and he's looking pretty pacey at the moment. Oh, there we go. Cobalt and James are side by side again, and the Ferrari of James gets back ahead of Cobalt, so he certainly wasn't about to give up on that position, having lost it a couple of laps ago, and he certainly has not given up. P6 now for him, regaining that place that he just lost a few moments ago, but you can pretty much bet your house that Cobalt is going to try and come back at James once again, as James and Cobalt both get a penalty at the same time as they look to jostle for position here. This is kind of going to play into the hands of Bazooka Joe before too long in the second McLaren, because he at the moment does not have a penalty to his name. JT is very, very close indeed to Lewis going into turn 12, but still not close enough to have a look at passing the Ferrari. Knowing, of course, that he doesn't need to go for a brave banzai move. Oh, Lewis has lost the back end, and JT's down the inside, but he's lost the back end slightly himself. Lewis tucks back into the situation. It's not going to matter. That was all it took. One little mistake from Lewis, and JT took full advantage. He snapped it up. He bit Lewis's hand off, and he takes the lead of the Russian Grand Prix. And Lewis now doesn't need to bank on JT getting a penalty. He needs to hope for a lot more than that in this Grand Prix. He needs to get himself back ahead of the Alfa Romeo, but that's going to be difficult because JT's pace has been absolutely tremendous so far. Meanwhile, Canute is challenging for 4th place. The other Alfa Romeo is outside the podium places. One's just taken the lead, one is now defending 4th place. He took 4th away from Canute a few laps ago. Vapor Canute is not prepared to give up on this battle yet. Miles Dunn isn't really escaping, is he? 1.5 seconds back to Carwin Robb, which is going to play into the hands of Vapor Canute as it stands at the moment. And towards the final DRS straight of the lap then. Canute is currently 6/10 of a second back from Carwin Robb. Doesn't look as though he's going to be close enough going into turn 12. No, he's not. That would have been barring any stupendous overtake from Canute. Last season raced for Williams as well. Took 3 race wins, 4 podiums. Out-qualified his teammates Lord Alam and Miles Dunn collectively 6 times last season, and outraced them 5 times. So clearly a very, very quick driver indeed, Vapor Canute, but here just struggling a little bit in this Grand Prix. Struggled a little bit as well in Silverstone in terms of getting himself on the podium, and did manage to eventually last Tuesday night take away a points finish, but not enough for the top 3. And if he's to get into the top 3 here, he needs to clear Carwin Robb as quickly as he possibly can. Meanwhile, out front, Lewis still trying to chase down JT, who's just had to collect a bit of a slide in the Alfa Romeo, but nothing too concerning for him at the moment. He's driving a brilliant race out front, having taken the lead moments ago from Lewis, who lost the back end through the chicane of 14 and 15, and that was all she wrote in terms of that particular battle for the lead. But Lewis isn't going to go away. He's not going to give up just yet, and Vapor Canute is certainly not going to give up on getting 4th place. He won't give up on the podium either, but as I say, he desperately needs to get past Carwin Robb in the next few laps if he is to have a shout at scoring a podium this evening. In towards these final couple of corners then, can Canute set himself up for the move down the home straight going into turn 2? Bit of a lock-up in the final corner, so the answer to that one is probably going to be a no as he comes up towards the DRS line. Carwin Robb still just outside DRS range of Miles Dunn, but probably not for too much longer, because that gap is coming down in that battle for 3rd place. So Canute knows that he has to get ahead of him as quickly as possible here before Carwin Robb has DRS and basically completely cancels out any pace advantage that JT has, that Canute has. Just under half a second between them. Just needs to nail that final part of the lap, really, doesn't he, Canute? That at the moment seems to be what's costing him going down the home straight, as Carwin Robb has to collect the back end. Not the first time we've seen an Alfa Romeo with a squiggly back end this evening. And still then half a second between them. Canute, you just wonder how long it's going to be before he gets to the phase of desperation. Carwin Robb is on fresher tyres as well, so it's a bit of a surprise that he's not making all that many inroads on Miles Dunn, and he's not escaping either from Vapor Canute. Down towards turn 12 they go. Canute is still not going to be close enough for the overtake. It's not in a massive braking zone through there, so it's very difficult to dive down the inside and go for an overtake as he runs wide, does Canute, and that'll just cost him a few tenths. And look at that, 9/10 of a second behind now, so that has cost him an awful lot of time. Harrison, meanwhile, is just outside of DRS range of Bazooka Joe in their battle for 8th place. Joe himself is just under 3 seconds behind his teammate Cobalt, who is now being dropped a little bit by TRT James, so that effort to get past him a little earlier on has been neutralised, and James now has P6. Well, you would probably say wrapped up, but you never know. Again, many things can happen between now and the end of the race. One of those, of course, is Lewis retaking the lead on track, because he is still only 4/10 of a second back from JT. Hasn't left the Alfa Romeo alone, hasn't left the world champion alone since he had to relinquish the lead due to a mistake earlier on. Has a penalty anyway, of course, so even if Lewis finishes on track ahead of JT, there's no guarantee he'll win the Grand Prix, because he then needs to extend the advantage to over 3 seconds. Canute then 6/10 behind Carwin Robb in their battle for 4th. Still unable to get a good enough exit out of turn 9 to be close enough with DRS going in towards this braking zone of turn 12. This is becoming frustrating for Canute. Can he try anything different? Can he find some inspiration, find some extra bit of pace out of somewhere in these final few corners to get himself close enough to the Alfa Romeo. Gets very close in towards these final couple of corners, and just seems to lose it slightly going into the final turn. Bit of a lock up there again, and across the line, slightly slower than his personal best on that last run round was Vapor Canoe, and 0.6 of a second down again. So once again, it's going to take quite a move going into turn 2, and he just doesn't quite have it. Lewis just doesn't quite have it to pass JT either at the moment. So these two very, very tight indeed on track. Lewis, of course, with that penalty, and Vapor Canoe with another penalty to his name, which is going to cost him even more in his battle for the podium places. Meanwhile, Harrison has caught Bazooka Joe, and he has passed Bazooka Joe going into turn 2. So that's now 8th place for the AlphaTauri driver. And with 9 laps to go here in Russia, he finds himself 3 seconds back from the other McLaren of Cobalt. And Harrison, of course, needs to extend this advantage because Bazooka Joe doesn't have a penalty, but Harrison, by contrast, does. Cobalt, meanwhile, picks up another penalty in his McLaren, which means that that'll be just more time that he has to make up between now and the end. Canoe hasn't given up, but I just wonder what else can he try to get 4th place. Miles Dunn still can't seem to drop Carwin Robb at the moment, but Carwin Robb just can't quite seem to break into DRS range. He's always agonisingly close, isn't he? But he just can't quite seem to get there. Quite seem to get within a second. Canoe. Well, that's better through the final corner. Is it good enough though? Doesn't look like it, does it? Because it's still 0.6. Carwin Robb still unable to get within a second of Miles Dunn in their battle for 3rd. And yeah, Canoe once again not quite close enough. Again, in need of something. Probably in need of a mistake from Carwin Robb, but that is something that probably is not forthcoming, because we know just how good Carwin Robb is, just how consistent he is as well. Carwin Robb last season, of course, in the Red Bull, managing a win, 2 podiums, and finished in the points 4 times as well in the 9 races that he had with us. Did, however, crash out or non-finish 5 times as Canoe runs wide again, and that just undoes the progress that he had made. He lost the time before by running wide as well, and he worked very hard to get that time back, and once again he's going to have to do that again, but makes up a fair bit of time down that DRS straight. Whilst Carwin Robb doesn't have DRS, he will now actually on Miles Dunn. He has had the slipstream, but he has DRS now on the racing point, so we'll see if he can get the job done on him, because of course Miles Dunn doesn't have a slipstream off anybody really at the moment. He's 1.5 seconds back from Lewis, so he's struggling to get a slipstream right now from the Ferrari. Lewis is just under half a second behind JT, but just cannot seem to get close enough for the move going into turn 2, and is still not close enough on this lap either. Carwin Robb then, as Miles Dunn gets another penalty. These are really going to tot up, aren't they, towards the end of the race, and with it being this close, you would have thought there was a safety car, but there hasn't been. Everybody's just so close at the moment, everybody's so well matched for pace, but as a result of that, there's a DRS train going on, and it's just so difficult to pass. Couple that with the fact that there really aren't many heavy braking zones at this circuit at all, and that just makes it a very difficult task to try and overtake cars. Harrison, meanwhile, has just over a second back to Bazooka Joe, which right now will not be enough to see him finish the Grand Prix in front of the German driver, because he needs 3 seconds back to the McLaren to finish ahead of him, with his penalty collected earlier on in this race. Lewis still 0.3 behind JT. Carwin Robb closing in on Miles Dunn, half a second now between these two, so he's making some very good inroads here as the Alfa Romeo in terms of getting this podium position. But this race, really, the battle for the podium particularly, is going to come down to who has the most penalties in the end, and that seemed to be the roughly the case in Silverstone as well towards the end of the race. And as Lewis won the race on, well, almost won the race on track, but his penalty put him a little bit further down the order as well. So, a bit of a shame for Lewis. Silverstone, very much a penalty-heavy race, and this, as you can see on the left-hand side, a very penalty-heavy race as well. Carwin Robb, again, closing in. He's experiencing the same problem that Canute has suffered behind the Alfa Romeo. Tell you what though, Miles Dunn is closing in, isn't he, on Lewis? So this is all of a sudden here going to become a five-way fight for the win, with about five and a half laps to go of this Grand Prix. So Miles Dunn has now broken into DRS range of Lewis, but the only problem is it's just cat and mouse, because Miles Dunn is going to have the same problem that Carwin Robb has behind him. And Carwin Robb's having the same problem behind Miles Dunn as Canute has had behind Carwin Robb for all these laps. It's just, you're close enough, or you think you're close enough, but the driver in front has a slipstream, he has DRS'd, and it's just stopping him from getting past. Lewis, however, has DRS on Canute, on JT, but just cannot seem to find a way past the Alfa Romeo, and of course he has a penalty as well. JT is the only one in the top 8 now without a penalty. He and Bazooka Joe, the only 2 drivers in this Grand Prix yet to get a penalty. Miles Dunn then is right behind Lewis, and I'll tell you what, the Racing Point looking very good indeed here behind the Ferrari. Slight lock-up going into the final corner, but it doesn't look as though it's going to matter, because Miles Dunn very, very close here to Lewis. Is this going to be enough as they go through turn 1 to get ahead of the Ferrari? I don't think it is, because there's that same issue again of the car in front having DRS and completely neutralising the DRS advantage that the car behind has. In towards turn 3 we go. This as difficult an overtaking spot as any around this circuit. And all of a sudden we have a massive battle on, but the thing is, as I say, everybody's got DRS and everybody's really struggling to make those gains. Canute just about hanging on to the back of this train, 0.8 of a second back from Carwin Robb. JT is now half a second clear of Lewis, so Lewis is, I think, is more looking at his wing mirrors now than he is looking in front at JT, particularly because of his penalty, which is really going to make it difficult for him to win this Grand Prix. Carwin Robb now very close to Miles Dunn, and this game of cat and mouse continues, and Miles Dunn has to go defensive. Carwin Robb goes to the outside at turn 12, surely can't pull that off, but he does cut back underneath him going into 13. Not sure it's going to matter, but can he cut back underneath again and get down the inside of turn 14? No, he can't. Not close enough to the Racing Point, but he's setting him up nicely here because he's still right behind him going in towards these final couple of corners. Here we go again through 16 and 17 and up towards the DRS line. And has anybody got a sufficient advantage? Well, Carwin Robb is so close here, isn't he, to the Racing Point, and this surely is going to be third place in this Grand Prix for Carwin Robb as he goes down the inside. No, he brakes earlier, so he just wasn't quite feeling as though he had enough going into the braking zone to get in front, although Miles Dunn has taken a weird line through turn 3, and Carwin Robb will try and go round the outside at turn 4. Can he pull it off? Oh, they both lose the back end, and look at Vapor Canute. That's the chance he was waiting for, and he does get past Carwin Robb. They both did so well to hold on to the back end on the exit of turn 4, but Vapor Canute said thank you very much, and he gets past Carwin Robb finally. He's been waiting so many laps to do that, and he now finds himself just behind Miles Dunn in the battle for the podium. As a result of that, Miles Dunn has now dropped back over a second behind the leaders, but here comes Vapor Canute. He's got DRS, he's got the slipstream, he's so much closer now to Miles Dunn. He tries to go round the outside at turn 12. Miles Dunn will defend it for all he's worth. Canute goes to the outer extremities of the circuit and pulls off a brilliant pass on the Racing Point. Carwin Robb is there as well. He looks very interested in going down the inside. Oh, round the outside goes Miles Dunn, gets the place back. That's a fantastic move from Miles Dunn to get the position back from Vapor Canute, who thought for his life that he had it done, but he didn't. and he gets repassed again by Miles Dunn. Oh, and he goes wide, gets another penalty, does Vapor Canoe. This is going to be a three-way battle now going in towards turn 2. Canute is side by side with Miles Dunn, but Carwyn Robb is going to be there as well. Canute's past Miles Dunn, Carwyn Robb's past Miles Dunn into turn 2, but Miles, oh, he's cut across the apex, and he has to give up the position there to the Alfa Romeo. Wouldn't have been particularly fair racing had he got ahead in that manner. Canute then, well, he's in third, but he's got a lot of penalties to his name here, so he's going to struggle, I believe, to stay in front. Meanwhile, Cobalt has managed to track down TRT James, not for the first time in this Grand Prix, and they can resume their battle. Cobalt, 2 podiums, 7 points finishes last season, one of the more consistent drivers of season 7, and right behind TRT James now for 6th place in the Russian Grand Prix. JT leads this Grand Prix, Lewis in 2nd. Vapor Canoe currently occupies 3rd, but his penalties might just put him back behind Carwyn Robb and Miles Dunn. Let's not forget as well that, of course, those positions might just change on track in the final couple of laps of this Grand Prix anyway. Cobalt with the slipstream, getting closer and closer to James. He won't be close enough on this lap, or on this corner, I should say. But you can see how much he's closing up to the back of him. Look at Carwyn Robb now. He's got DRS and Canute does not. And Carwyn Robb closing up to the back of the Williams. Canute goes defensive. Is that going to be a futile effort to defend the position? Yes, it is, because Carwyn Robb's passed him. Back up into 3rd place he goes. And this ding-dong battle between these 3 drivers continues, and Carwyn Robb now finds himself back up into the podium places. Everybody just fighting each other for 3rd, and 3rd place seems to be changing hands so quickly here in the final couple of laps of the race. Who's going to get more penalties? Who's going to finish in 3rd place? Who's going to finish in 1st place at the end of this Grand Prix? JT has been imperious since he took the lead from Lewis. He's withstood the pressure brilliantly, and TRT James, I think, has made a mistake somewhere. He has. He's lost his front wing as well in the Ferrari. TRT James, who I thought was going to go incident-free in this race, has lost his front wing. He's smashed into the barrier in pure frustration right at the end of the Grand Prix. James has lost it, and that is him out of the race. Benjamin has come into the pits. He'll put a set of soft tyres on, and that surely will be fastest lap for Benjamin, barring any serious mistakes from him in these final 2 laps of the Grand Prix. Canute now, in trying to get back ahead of Carwyn Robb, now has Miles Dunn all over the back of him as they round the final corner. Canute will have DRS on Carwyn Robb. I thought he was going to get another penalty there for running wide at the final corner, but he just managed to avoid it. So the rear wing opens on the Williams, the rear wing opens on the Racing Point, and Canute, by the looks of it, will just about be able to stay in front of Miles Dunn for the time being. Benjamin then in the AlphaTauri just come out of the pits. Of course, he'll try and get the fastest lap. Vapor Canute is trying not to get too many more penalties, but he's got another one, and that pretty much puts complete pay to his battle for the podium. JT then 5/10 ahead of Lewis, although that's really 3.6 seconds ahead of Lewis at the moment because of Lewis's penalty. And so in the end, it's going to be a more comfortable margin for JT. And he's done so well along with Bazooka Joe to avoid penalties, particularly because he's been under so much pressure from Lewis since he took the lead off him. But he hasn't wilted, and that's what champions do. And that's what JT has done tonight. He won the championship last season. It's his first race in Season 8 this season, and he's come into it with an absolute bang. He nearly took pole position in qualifying, was denied it by Lewis, who slid across the line. Incidentally, it was Lewis's slide that gave JT the lead of the Grand Prix on track, but since then he's defended it resolutely. He's done well not to get a penalty. It's been a superb drive from JT, and he wins the Russian Grand Prix. Lewis finishes in 2nd place, Carwyn Robb takes 3rd, and Canute is put behind Miles Dunn because of his penalties. He smashed into the barrier across the line. Miles Dunn then takes P4. Cobalt will eventually take 6th place when he comes across the line. Harrison is not too far behind him, but he couldn't quite catch the McLaren in time to get past him by the end of the Grand Prix. So round the final corner comes Cobalt, and he takes 6th place. Harrison will round the final corner for 7th. Bazooka Joe, one of only 2 drivers, along with JT, not to get a penalty, will have 9th place in this Grand Prix. And Benjamin here, 1.5 seconds up on his personal best. So we're going to see if he can take the fastest lap of the Grand Prix on the very last lap, having bolted on that set of soft tyres, although he has just run out of ERS on this lap. Has the AlphaTauri. Is that going to affect him here? Remains to be seen. It is a purple middle sector, though, from Benjamin, so surely it will be the fastest lap, which, of course, will be another point for him to take home. So 3 points from this Grand Prix for him once he eventually crosses the line. But JT has returned to the Formula PlayStation League. He missed round 1. He certainly did not miss round 2. He takes a stunning victory here in Sochi. It is then JT who takes the win in Russia. His first race of the season is a successful one. Lewis in 2nd place for Ferrari. Cohen Robb takes P3 and the final podium spot. Miles Dunn beats Vapor Canute to 4th. Bazooka Joe finishes in 6th for McLaren. Cobalt takes 7th from this Grand Prix. Harrison in 8th place. Benjamin in 9th. He gets the point for the fastest lap as well, right at the end there. James in 10th place, but he crashed out of the session, so I'm not sure he'll get the point for that. Knowing Light in P11, having retired, and Sol retiring from the Grand Prix as well in his FPSL debut. So JT came back in Season 8 to make his championship statement, and he most certainly did that. He wins the Russian Grand Prix. We'll see you next Tuesday for round number 3 in what is turning out to be an extremely entertaining championship fight. Good night.